नमस्ते। आप सभी का स्वागत है। वेलकम एवरीवन। And today we are going to talk about a new constitution for India again. And today I have a very distinguished personality in our midst. We have Professor Gautam Desiraju. Professor Gautam Desiraju is an honorary professor at the Indian Institute of Science and is also a structural chemist and educationist. He's also written a book. It is called Bharat India 2.0. So, may I ask you, Professor Gautam Desiraju, first of all, welcome you to the Jaipur Dialogues. May I ask you, why do you call Bharat India 2.0?
Namaste, Sanjay ji. And at the outset, let me tell you that it is quite an honor to appear in your podcast. I've been listening to it for several years now, and I feel that people like you are now building up the critical mass of correct thinking that has to go in, especially for a country like Bharat that is undergoing at a civilizational turning point. And we are at that very exciting turning point, and hence the 2.0 epithet in the title of my book, because the obvious question is what is India 1.0? And I would probably say that India 1.0 was the period from 26th January 1950, the day we adopted our constitution, till the 14th of May 2014, when the present BJP government won an absolute majority in the Lok Sabha. So I think that, for me at least, and by 1.0, I mean a certain way of thinking that was set in place with our 1950 constitution. So give or take, governments have come and gone from various political parties and so on and so on, but the basic kind of thinking remained the same. Now, the reason I feel that a single party got an absolute majority in the Lok Sabha, which is, as I'm sure you will admit, is a very rare event, especially in today's fractious times, is that the people of India slowly started realizing who they were. And I think throughout the coalition Raj of the 1990s, we were a confused lot. We really didn't know who we were and what we were up to. And I think suddenly we started realizing who we were. And I think that feeling got even more reinforced in 2019. We were even more sure as to who we were. But still, this does not constitute India 2.0. I feel India 2.0, we are on the threshold of it. And this would mean a complete remaking of India into Bharat. That is why I say it is Bharat India 2.0. So, this word India, I think, is now going to mean less and less. And the word Bharat is going to mean more and more. And this remaking from 1.0 to 2.0, I feel one of the major ways in which it can be done is to write a new constitution. Because nothing short of that, I feel, is going to achieve the required goal, which it appears a vast bulk of the people seem to want. Although the exact nature and outline as to what this new constitution shall be, I think still remains. But since you asked why 2.0, I think it is that. Our 1950 constitution says India, that is Bharat.
Right,
For a start, I think we can say Bharat, that is India. And
quite
we
right.
could even go further, sir. And I think you can say Bharat, that is Bharat Varsha. And I think that is what one really means in this civilizational understanding and realization that many, many people in our country have begun to understand. And by the way, this goes across religion, caste, language, and all that. This is not particular to any of these three attributes. So, this is a brief justification for the 2.0 since you asked.
Right, sir. And recently we saw Dr. Vivek Debroy, who is the chairman of the Economic Advisory Council of the Prime Minister. He also expressed similar sentiments. He wrote an article on that, and we did, of course, uh, and a review of that particular article. And the point is that the Jaipur Dialogues, I think a couple of years ago, probably 3 years back, we did an event. We do an annual event, an annual summit, and each annual summit has a theme. And at that time, I think it was 2018 or 2019, the theme was Republic 2.0. So that is similar to your India 2.0, Republic 2.0. And one of the major issues that were raised there was that this constitution has been subverted, wittingly or unwittingly, by none else by but by its custodians, the judiciary, because they brought in such extraneous elements such as the basic structure doctrine. And recently the ex Chief Justice of India, uh, Ranjan Gogoi himself, said that it has a very, very doubtful jurisprudential basis. And I guess that's one of the reasons that we need a change. And one of the major reasons that Professor Vivek Devroy pointed out, I guess rightly so. I think our people in our constituent assembly, even if you read the debates, you will find that they were in too much of a hurry. I think they wanted to inaugurate a new constitution as soon as possible. And that's the reason that they did copy paste. And 80% of it was the Government of India Act 1935. What's your opinion?
Sanjay ji, you have raised several interesting points here. There are actually four questions you have asked. So let me see if I
They are all
get them.
interrelated, actually.
They are sort of interrelated and sort of not. Okay, Mr. Debroy's article, certainly he has expressed an opinion here about the new constitution, and I think certainly his vantage position as chairman of EAC to PM certainly adds a little bit of flavor to the whole thing, because there is an unasked question here behind this, which I will not ask because I think it is obvious as to what the question is. But I think Mr. Debroy is like others. There have been a lot of discussion on this constitution. And of course, I enjoyed Mr. Ankit Shah's conversation with you just 3 or 4 days ago. And so it means that there are many people who are thinking on these lines today. It's what we call in science critical mass. This critical mass or nucleating, minimum nucleation cluster of people who are thinking on the same lines has now clearly seems to be apparent to me, at least. Now, if you think about written in haste, you said written in haste, copy paste, judiciary. Let's take up these three things which are related but one by one. Now, written in haste, I feel that it was partly unavoidable. I think, firstly, it is well known that independence was hurried. It was supposed to be 1948. And then Mountbatten goes to England for a mysterious visit in April 47, then comes back and then suddenly says that independence is going to be August 47. I think this was quite a shock. Although the Cripps mission and the Simla conference had led to the setting up of the Constituent Assembly, I think in 46, November 46, I think still people thought they would have a little more time to think about all these things. Now suddenly independence was imminent. And with that, the other brutal fact was partition. And I think this partition actually had a major role to play in this quick approach to writing the constitution. And also, I think if you read the Constituent Assembly debates day by day, 165 days, you will find that most of the members actually appeared to be traumatized by the fact that partition had even occurred. I think there was some knowledge about this from 38 after the UP provincial election and all that. It was all sort of slowly building up. But I believe nobody, including Jinnah by 41, 42, even thought that it might happen. People perhaps thought it might not happen also. So suddenly here was partition. And a constituent assembly of 400 people suddenly became 300 because 100 ran away to Pakistan. So the whole thing, I think, was put in a fast forward, and I think a main fear of the makers of the constitution, our assembly, was that they feared a second religion-based partition. I think this was paramount in their heads because if there was a second religion-based partition, then the country would have collapsed then and there. It would have been total anarchy of the kind Churchill was predicting, in a somewhat dour manner. Now, so I think the speed thing, little bit, they can't avoid, and most countries have written their constitution in somewhat of a similar period of time, 2 to 3 to 4 years, because many countries became independent. The U.S. constitution was written in a year, for example. So I think they did. I don't think that that part could have been avoided. Now, cut and paste is a more serious matter because there is no doubt that our constitution closely follows the Government of India Act 1935. Now,
Can
as
I can I
a
can I just put in a word here? Is that
please,
actually we say that the Constituent Assembly made the Constitution, but it was presented with a fait accompli because Sir B.N. Rao had the constitutional advisor to the
absolutely,
Constituent Assembly had prepared a draft constitution, and it is
absolutely.
that draft constitution that was debated. So the Constituent Assembly did not even prepare the draft constitution.
You are absolutely correct, sir. Because there were actually, I think, 3 or 4 documents prepared under British supervision in 1946 itself. And B.N. Rao had a major say in drafting these documents, and I recount all those documents in my book actually. So it was there, and it was still they were in charge, and so the reference back to the Government of India 1935 Act is unavoidable. B.N. Rao was an honorable ICS bureaucrat who worked for the British. So whatever it is, whatever be the other things, there would have been a certain instinct to write the document in a particular way. Now, if you actually look at the document today, our constitution has got little less than 400 articles. Fully
395
250 of
to be exact.
395 or 390. So fully 250 of them have a almost direct equivalent or are carbon copies of the 1935 Act. Now,
Right.
I believe at some point of time, Ambedkar was asked about this. And I think he gave a somewhat unsatisfactory answer that the common portions had to do with the functioning of the executive. But actually, it doesn't. There's more to the common areas than just functioning of the executive because the 3 wings of government, the bicameral legislature, the relationship between center and state, the parliamentary democracy itself, with the first past the post system of elections, many of these things were there. And so unconsciously, we adopted the model of an unwritten constitution of a country which needed 1,000 years to optimize its constitution. And at the end of the day, if you look at it, Sanjay ji, the portions that are different from the 1935 Act are the ones that have attracted the most amount of controversy with the judiciary and all these things, especially these articles 15, 16, 25 through 30. All these things were things that are not there in that 1935. So maybe today it looks as if 1935 Act has got an exaggerated importance simply because we have been fighting about all the other portions. For example, one of the most important things that is not there in the 35 Act is the fundamental rights. There's a brief mention of rights, all right, but it is not enlisted in the way in which it is done, and certainly there is nothing about directive principles. So I think that yes and no, but on the whole, one cannot avoid that criticism. I think Mr. Debroy is correct on that score. Now, you mentioned the judiciary. This is the most serious aspect. and some of the controversial things. And especially, I would feel this Kesavananda Bharati judgment of the early 70s, which again many people have questioned, including our Honorable Vice President, on the floor of the House, Rajya Sabha. I think this is, and with narrow 7-6 majority they passed, and this absurd idea, let me say, of the basic structure. Because basic structure should not be something that you get by putting judges putting tick marks. Somebody said secular, somebody said parliamentary, somebody said this, somebody said that. So now basic structure means anything that anybody wants it to mean. And one thing I can tell you from my scientific background, if it is very difficult to define something and you need 100 definitions, then it means it is meaningless. And
Right.
ideally, as I've written in my book, basic structure should not even be written. It is something that if you go and ask a vendor on the street who is selling bananas in a cart, he should be able to tell you what is basic structure. You do not need judges and lawyers to tell us what is basic structure. It should be instinctive and automatic. That is what is not captured. And then they have used this basic structure for all sorts of things. Now, almost it becomes like a kind of a phantom, It can appear anywhere, it can disappear anywhere, it can be used in whatever manner they want. And so and what has happened as a result of Kesavananda Bharati. And the other problem with Kesavananda Bharati is the great error in forming a law which is directed against a person. I mean, recently we saw that in this Kejriwal Delhi case, but the Kesavananda Bharati was far more serious because it was a law directed against Indira Gandhi. Because it is felt that she was exceeding her brief, which she was. But at the same time, when you pass a law directed against a person, then nobody could imagine that it will go to the other extreme afterwards, which is what has happened. The judiciary has now starting to usurp functions of the executive and the legislature. They feel they can say whatever they like, including some of the comments, just comments from the bench which don't appear in the judgment. I think many of these things are quite distasteful in the modern context. So I think a new constitution, if people in authority are really thinking about this or what a new constituent assembly should do, is seriously rethink the role of our judiciary. I mean, they've done all kinds of things, Sanjay ji. This collegium system doesn't exist in the constitution.
Right, right. In fact, to supplement you, in the collegium system, because what they have done, how they have brought the collegium system is by reinterpreting the word consultation in the chapter relating to judiciary, particularly Article 124. Now, in the Constituent Assembly, there is a pointed debate on consultation versus concurrence. And
Yes.
Dr. Ambedkar replied to that debate and said that we cannot assume that the Supreme Court judges or the Chief Justice of India is going to be infallible. He cannot be invested with a veto. That's the import of what he said in that debate, and I have accepted it and written about it also when that debate happened on this issue. And they go and do precisely the opposite of that, and they have now evolved instruments like evolving constitution. The constitution is an evolving doctrine, and judiciary is the master of that evolution. That is one. And secondly is that the Chief Justice of India, the present Chief Justice of India, he said in one of these off the cuff remarks that we have never been bound by an originalistic interpretation of our constitution. What does all this mean? Tyranny of the unelected, as Arun Jaitley had said.
He said that we can question the statutes and various other interesting things because you see, at the end of the day, I would feel that no matter what the problems, the legislature is the one that is directly chosen by the people. Rightly or wrongly, they are the ones who have been chosen by the people. I think they most accurately represent the people. So if anybody is to have any kind of veto, It should not be the executive and it should not be the judiciary. If anybody, it should be the legislature. And this is why this relationship of Article 368 to Article 13, which is what Keshavananda Bharati was all about, I think this whole matter has to be, Golaknath also a little bit before that, all kinds of crazy judgments which led up to Keshavananda Bharati. And I think we should, Sanjay ji, we as Indians should have the courage and the honesty to look back in the past, because this is all distant past now. So we will not be committing any personal slights or allegations, but we should be able to distinguish what is correct and what is not correct, especially for the India of today. The India of 2023 is not the India of 1972. I think so. We can't have things fixed in stone. I mean, the same Chief Justice yesterday or day before yesterday correctly said he instructed Mr. Kapil Sibal again about this concurrence thing and the fact that there cannot be anything that is permanently there, that it can never be changed. So
That is
he is
that is
able,
in the
he is able
370.
to understand. He
I
is able
noticed
to
that. Yes,
understand the matter, but somehow when it comes to something else, he will put it in another way. I think this is my feeling about it.
quite right. He made a distinction between consultation and concurrence because
He
it is
did. He did.
expressly there
This is an
in
important one.
in clause 1 of the Article 370.
Correct.
They have made clear distinction between concurrence and consultation. So let's go to the mm, structure part now. Now that we've discussed what the broad problems are, and you mentioned the legislature, but the problem in the way the legislature has worked, and that is basically the British model, because for the British, legislature was just an extension of the executive, and that's how the Government of India Act 1935 was framed, and that is how it has remained. Our legislatures are just an extension of the executive. Look at the provision of the whip. You don't have that kind of a situation in a place like the United States, where legislatures are definitely, even if they belong to the same party, the executive can have no absolute control over them. What do you think about that?
Again, two interesting points. I have somewhat strong views on this topic. And the parliamentary democracy of the kind, the Westminster model, I have argued in my book, it only works, ideally speaking, with an unwritten constitution. So, parliament is supreme. So, the constitution is what the lawmakers of the day decide it is. So, tomorrow somebody else will come and they will change the law, and that becomes a new constitution. In such a system, the judiciary naturally will become somewhat weak. And that is, in that system, rightly so. Now, you are right. We cannot have that system even, which is why I have questioned at a certain level whether the parliamentary democracy system, whether the Westminster model itself is suitable for us, especially a diverse country. The British Isles, okay, you can say there are 4 nations there, but nothing matches up to the diversity of India in terms of language, in terms of religion, in terms of caste, in terms of climate, diet, everything. So, any constitution, any decent constitution must not only acknowledge and recognize this diversity, but it must also seek to optimize the diversity, because the diversity is our strength. Our unity only comes from our diversity. It is never diversity from unity. So I think this diversity thing is one thing that should be done in a new constitution. And then which is why I feel you talk about the American system. In fact, I do feel that it is an ideal system for us. Ambedkar himself was a great admirer of the US Constitution. But apart from indirect reference to their Bill of Rights, which led to our fundamental rights, there is not much of the US Constitution there. And the system, the rigid separation of the three wings in the US actually makes their legislature very strong. And especially the genius of Benjamin Franklin in having a Senate with only two members for each state and a House which will be elected by in terms of the number of people who live there. It really gives a beautiful balance between the importance of being a state in that union, whether you are Colorado or Wyoming, or whether you are New York or California, you only have two people in the Senate. I mean, this is very nice. It means it makes the small states feel good. At the same time, when the House of Representatives is elected with a proportional representation based on the people, then that is based on the population. And the fact that legislation needs to go through both houses, not like our shady Rajya Sabha thing, which is actually nothing now. And it makes it a perfect system. And the other thing that I also argue in the book is that by having an elected president and an elected governor, then you can remove all this hoda and all the present nonsense with these assemblies and chief ministers and ministers. You see, what has happened in the present system is that if you are an elected person in the ruling party and then you are not a minister, then you actually practically you become nikamma. Nothing. There's nothing for you to do. And as you rightly pointed out, that anti-defection bill, famous one of Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, 1985 or something, it has seen to it that there is no role for, like, especially today, when a single party has got a majority in the Lok Sabha, the MPs of that party who are not ministers are actually, they can go and cut ribbons and open and do all those things. They have nothing else to do, practically speaking. I mean, let us be little blunt and brutal about this, which is why the great desire to become a minister. And then the other side of this minister thing, of course, need not be said, that with such a great desire to become a minister, then the other things like corruption and all will start. So it becomes a kind of a self-defeating thing. And I feel that a new constitution, that is why we need a new constitution and not amendments to the present constitution, which is what some people are saying. I think we do need to change over to the American system. And we must never forget that that British system works for them because they took 1,000 years to do it. It was not done overnight. And no other country has the luxury of 1,000 years to write a constitution. So one
Yes,
cannot
for them
take
it
a
was an
model.
organic document.
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean, it is. It works very well for them. And just to say that because they were, and that is the danger of this government of India 1935. Because consciously or unconsciously, you said in the beginning, wittingly or unwittingly, this is this unwittingly part. By taking that act, you have burdened us with a system of governance which may not be the best one for us. In fact, as of this moment, I am practically sure that the parliamentary democracy system with first past the post is not at all suited to us. First past the post is what has led to all the election irregularities. I'm not saying proportional representation is good, but at least there should be some discussion and debate about this. And this brings me to the next point, that talk about a new constitution, there must be a very wide public debate, public discussions like the one you are having now. Within a week, you are having two podcasts on the same topic. And this is very nice because we must hear more voices. We must hear more voices from all sides. And above all, I hope we will take up the other point next, the dharmic business, which is, I think,
We will
something
do
that.
that now. Let me request the audience to please subscribe to the channel and also to like the video and share the video. And also, while subscribing, please press the bell icon so that you keep getting the notifications in time.
And
You mentioned about the dharmic and civilizational
may I
part
tell the
in your
audience
book.
please, मुझे जरा माफ कीजिए, मेरा हिंदी इतनी तो अच्छा नहीं है, इसीलिए अंग्रेजी में बात कर रही
No,
हैं
sir,
आज संजय
it
जी के
doesn't matter.
साथ.
It doesn't matter. We are bilingual, not a problem. Uh, In fact, we would very much like to be fluent in other languages as well, but then we have our limitations. So, about the dharmic and civilizational part. Now, I have discussed this in varying degrees with many people, but not many people buy this argument now. Because you are a scientist, I think you are in a better position to appreciate this. Is that recently, that is in the last year's Independence Day address, the Pancha Prana or Pancha Prana, as he pronounced it at that time, the Prime Minister, the number 5, he said, Nagarikon ke kartavya. Now, when he says Nagarikon ke kartavya, that basically means dharma. We are a dharmic
Yes,
society, so where we always placed duties above our rights, and rights were actually granted in order to fulfill the duties. That was the basis. Now, this so-called individualism, which again has its root in the mechanistic universe theory of Descartes. That's what started the revolution in the social sciences. And they brought the theory of individuals above the whole. And then you had the so-called progressive movements where individual became the seed everywhere. In fact, the whole Renaissance was about the individuals taking precedence and breaking the old uh, Catholic patriarchy. That was the original patriarchy, though of course these days they blame the Brahmins for it. Now, my issue is with that science, after they discovered after science discovered the theory of relativity and then finally discovered quantum mechanics, they gave up on that theory. Now, the
correct.
mechanistic universe no longer defines science or the quest of science, but it continues regardless in the social sciences, which according to me are fake sciences because they do not follow the scientific methods these days. They have basically become dogmatic. This anointment of the individual in our constitution vis-a-vis our old dharmic principles and juxtaposing them in the mechanistic universe versus the quantum universe, whereas in the social sciences, the same mechanistic universe is individual as the seed or as the defining quantity continues. How do we reconcile all this?
I would simply, as a start, say that there's not much for me to say because I agree with you in toto. I mean, you mentioned the Renaissance, you mentioned indirectly the 30 Years' War that led to the separation of church and state and gave us this funny word secular, which has no relationship to anything that is going on in our country because it was a purely Christian idea that came from the power of the Pope and the 30 Years' War. Now, how far has this reductionist science of the Renaissance taken them? Not even 500 years. How long have the great civilizations of India and China lasted? An order of magnitude higher, and they show no signs of diminishing. Today, a big country like Russia has recognized, if you read the words of Alexander Dugin and others, that they're saying the whole experiment that Russia tried to look westwards from Peter the Great was all wrong. And that Russia is not Western. They said we are Eurasian, we are a different civilization. This whole concept of civilization, sir, doesn't feature in our constitution at all. If you ask me what is basic structure, there's a single word only, dharma, that's all. That is basic structure. Because all of us know, whatever religion we may be in India, we know the meaning of that word dharma. You can't define it, but we all know what it means. Now, if you take this absolutely correct thing that where did Newton and Einstein, where did the whole difference started? It is interesting to know that Swami Vivekananda said all these things about 15 years before the uncertainty principle and Max Planck and the beginnings of quantum mechanics. Because he said if you go on subdividing matter into smaller and smaller and smaller bits, there comes the time when you cannot distinguish any more from mind and matter. At that point, suddenly, Sanjay ji, the only thing that is real is Brahman. That's it. There is nothing else after that. And so suddenly you have to start using different yardsticks. Now, if you think I am speaking esoteric metaphysics, it is not so. Even in the hard sciences, why is a disease like cancer or type 2 diabetes so difficult to treat? Why are cholera and typhoid easy to treat? For this reason, because cancer and type 2 diabetes are examples of complex systems. They are not simple systems. So that when you try to attack it in one way, the system itself finds another way to circumvent your attack. So things like this cannot be handled by the classical methods. And so you need different kinds of methods. Science itself has, even climate change comes under this broad category. So the more and more you try reductionist, individualistic, Charles Darwin types of thinking, the more and more you will start looking foolish. Like today, America is looking really foolish. What happened in that COVID exercise? Forget all the sinister connotations behind. But basically, they couldn't do it. In fact, we did a better job in COVID than many of these countries, simply by not doing some of the foolish things they were doing. So where has this reductionism taken? Today, the glorification of the individual has become so much there that you have got this LGBTQ, A, B, C, D plus so many things. So this is where it has taken them. And this individualism thing and reductionism has made 15% of the population rich at the expense of the other 85%. The colonial system, of course, had a great deal to do with perpetuating this thing. And America, of course, is trying the new colonialism through, computer coolies and high-tech coolies and AI coolies and all these things that they're trying now. You don't actually have to go and attack and occupy another country physically. You can do it, sitting in your own room, and they can also be where they are, and you will still, attack them fully. So I think this is something that we in India have to be very careful about, because this country is actually coming up economically. And at a time like this, there will be great many people in America and other places, George Soros, all these types, what we may familiarly call the Tukde gang of the whole world, who will have a special interest in destabilizing India. So our new constitution must safeguard against this. You can't have some vital thing coming up and then the Supreme Court saying, collegium, I don't want to, and I'm not going to allow this. And I'm going to allow some, crazy lawyers to come and file PLIs. See, such things. This is where I think the new constitution, dharmic thing you say. What is this dharma? What is Sanatana Dharma? The endless dharma. It means a good balance between individual and society. It is not that our civilizations negated the individual. The individual still has an important role. But the relationship, the society thing has completely broken down in the West. And I think the West is a failed model. You see, Ukraine, they're going to get, complete cow dung on their faces by the time I think Putin is done with them. Because it's not working anymore. Today, Ukraine person has said that he wants to send Ukraine troops to fight in Africa. I mean, you see, it is now becoming bizarre. And it is what happens when the whole system has broken down. Finally, Renaissance science, reductionism, had its limits. It worked briefly when they controlled shipping mostly. With shipping, they could develop a colonial system. This is a very crude economic model for success. But once that whole thing broke down, it took 60, 70, 80 years. But now you see the final result. But all that aside, that is historical and you can't change the past. Our new constitution should take all these dangers into account, which is why something based on incremental change, let's make a few more amendments. There are some things in the Government of India Act which are still nice. Adjust karo bhai, sab theek ho jayega. This will not work. It will not work in India 2.0 anymore. But India 2.0 demands something more than that. The people now demand a quick and easy method to get where we want to get fast. It is not really how good something is, but really how fast you can get there. Because if I can get to something which is even half as good in double the time, I will definitely choose that. In half the time, I will definitely take that. I don't want to get to some perfect place, after a million years. I really don't. I don't think the people of India want that. They are too impatient, they are too aspirational. And so I think any responsible government should be able to realize that this is what the people really want, and not confuse it with, other silly things like this and that.
Right. So, I think we will now move towards concluding this talk. And I remember a story from Mahabharata, and that relates to birth of Duryodhan. When Duryodhan was born, there were a lot of bad
Mhm.
omens,
Mhm.
and due to those bad omens, when the wise men were consulted, they said that this boy should be destroyed, otherwise he will destroy the country. And a particular shloka was used. Said kulasyarthe tyajete ekam, gramasyarthe kulam tyajit, gramam janapadasyarthe atmarthe prithvim tyajit. That for the society, you give up the interest of the individual, and for the interest of the gram, that is the village or town, then the interest of the that particular kul or family or clan should be sacrificed, and for the interest of the nation, Janapada, as you know, those Janapadas used to
Correct.
be the little countries there. For that, the interest of the town should be sacrificed, and for your own, for your own individual self, you find something else. You leave the earth. आप जो है वो आत्मा आपकी परमात्मा से मिला दीजिए. Oh, I think that can be the spirit if you really want a functioning, harmonized country, a dharmic country like India. So, your final word, sir.
Yeah, lest the audience feels that we've been talking too idealistically. I don't think so. I think the will of the people now is sufficiently strong. And based on these successive election mandates we seem to be giving to the present government, I think the government will then miss a valuable opportunity if it doesn't realize the meaning of these electoral victories. And that the people want something, they know who they are, they know what they want. And finally, it is only those in authority who are in a position to give to the people in the end what they have voted for. So we are still very much a democracy. And I'd like to, my concluding words even are about democracy itself. As what Sandeep Balakrishnan has said somewhere, he says, we are a very democratic people. We believe in democracy. But what we don't want is the Christianized form of democracy, which the Western democracies use. That we don't want. Because that Christianized form of Western democracy is only a way for big industry and the deep state to establish its control over the whole country and, in fact, the whole world. And so that is something that goes violently against our core principles of Sanatana Dharma, which is, as what is said in the Lalita Sahasranama, goddess is described as Dharma Dhara Dhanadyaksha Dhana Dhanya Vivardhini. That is exactly what we want. Welfare of the people and then vanquishing all the enemies. Dharma also tells you to go and vanquish your enemies if it comes to it. Like you said, that nation comes first, Bharat comes first, then comes your state, then comes your city, then comes your house, then comes you yourself as an individual. And I think I'm convinced, Sanjay ji, about the essential goodness of Indians. I think we are there. We could not have gone on for 5,000 years unless there was something very permanent and very big and very good about all of us. So I feel that the only thing that is now needed is carpe diem, seize the moment. This is the moment. And our leaders should not sit and worry about very small things at this time, just to get one electoral seat here and one parliament there, and win this state and lose that state. I think at stake is something much bigger, and that is the reality of Bharat is now so close. We should not let it go.
Right, sir. Thank you very much. On that note, we will conclude this talk. I think this is going to be an ongoing discussion for a long time because there are very many features, very many things that you've said in your book which we have not discussed. Something like 75 states that also will need to be discussed at some point. So thank you very much. This is the book, Bharat, India 2.0. And this is available for you to buy. And you can buy it from Amazon. And we will put up the link in the description.
There's a Kindle version also. Kindle version.
There's a
is
Kindle version also. In fact, I am reading the Kindle version.
also. Okay.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the viewers.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Sanjayji. It's been a great
Professor
pleasure talking to
Raju,
you.
for gracing the Jaipur Dialogues. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jai
once again.
Hind, Jai Bharat, Vande Mataram.
Jai Hind, Bharat Mata ki Jai.